Everyone. Welcome back to a new Sox Machine Live. It's been a minute, as the cool kids would say, since we've done this last. Last time we did this was early July, and we're in mid-August. And last time we had a Sox Machine Live episode, we were talking about a White Sox team fighting to get back to 500. It's mid-August, and we're still talking about a White Sox team that's hovering around 500. I'm Josh Nelson alongside Jim Margulis, the managing editor of SoxMachine.com. Thank you to everyone that's watching the live stream of this episode on our YouTube page at youtube.com/SoxMachine. And for those that are also watching on SoxMachine.com, really appreciate it. And for the podcast listeners, thank you guys so much for listening to the audio version of this episode afterwards. All right. So the Chicago White Sox, after their home series post All-Star break, against Cleveland, had the easiest 19-game stretch of their season. The Rockies, the Athletics, the Royals, Rangers, Royals again, and Tigers. They have played 16 of those 19 games, Jim, and they are 8-8 after losing the series against Kansas City. I don't want to go break down every moment that happened in this series against the Royals because I do not want to get frustrated and angry and become that character. I think it's the movie Inside Out. The red guy who just gets super angry and fire shoots from their head. Like that's where I would be, try to recap this series against the Royals. But we're 16 games into the easiest 19-game stretch of the season for the White Sox. Like, where is your head at, Jim, after this series?
I'm basically the headline I wrote for the finale of the series, which is a mediocre team poorly managed. And that's what I kind of keep coming back to. I think the White Sox talent more or less is on hand. I mean, Tim Anderson is hurt, but Tim Anderson was playing about as well as a, 40th percentile Larry Garcia. So that's not really a step down, going from him to, now Garcia's hurt, and Garcia, that was weird. Just watching Garcia take all those injured swings and nobody doing anything about it. Nobody really asking about it. I think there's like a limited beat presence in Kansas City, but that was one of the weirder moments that I just want to acknowledge. But whether they're hurt, whether they're not hurt, whether they're hustling, whether they're not hustling, whether they're running hard, whether they're running as hard as they can, and it doesn't matter. Like I'm thinking about like Yasmani Grandal in the bases or Andrew Vaughn in right field. Like basically there's, when it comes to the various facets of their game, speed, defense, pitching, starting, bullpen, etc., like everything drags them back to 500. They're just like it's like a tractor beam that they can't escape. Like no matter how hard they try in one area, another area drags them back down. And then basically at the center of it all, connected to every arm of this effort is Tony La Russa, who's doing a pretty bad job and is coming across in his comments as very tone deaf or
aloof.
Obtuse, aloof, like whatever you want to call it. Like, whether he's in denial or whether he just doesn't know. Like, he doesn't strike me as engaged or in tune. And I think, there is a natural, he's a defense lawyer. Like that's kind of how he approaches the job. So he's always going to say like, it's not as bad as it looks, or it's better than you think. But when everybody's watching the same thing, and now you're seeing some players a couple times over the past week say like, that they don't like the way this looks. He's losing, it seems, the messaging battle.
Yeah, and let's talk about that message here, as Johnny Cueto is the most recent White Sox player to comment about what is happening. And in the 8-3 loss from Wednesday night, he told the White Sox beat reporters, quote, "We can't get comfortable. We need to go out, play, and play hard and show what we can do. We need to fight. We need to show the fire that we have, if we have any." And it's that last part, Jim,
that's a hell of a clause.
Yeah, that everyone attached and hook to that comment. And that's what they've been talking about for the White Sox. And did that light a spark under the White Sox butt? No, they lost 5-3 on Thursday. Maddening game, as They had the bases loaded with nobody out, didn't score the previous inning. They had runners on first and second, nobody out, didn't score. I think they had 14 hits in the game, only scored 3 runs, and 2 of those 14 hits were home runs that drove in the runs. So the other 12 hits didn't do a damn thing in the game for the White Sox. And we'll get to that in a moment. But the lack of fire and some of the things that you touched on, Jim, like the base running isn't there. The defensive lapses at times in games. Wednesday was a great example of that. The first 5 innings, the White Sox were turning pretty slick double plays. And then Yohan Moncada has a bad inning defensively in the 6th inning, makes a couple poor throws, and then all of a sudden the game is tied. And ad nauseum, we've been talking about the corner outfield spots for the White Sox and their inability to get fly balls and make those plays where an average outfielder will make them. What caught my attention, Jim, was the post-game comments from Steve Stone after Thursday's loss. And this is a great example of what you chimed in on Monday about Stone being the last year of his contract, and sometimes he just lets things fly to help in contract negotiations. And he said that as long as this team continues to tolerate players not hustling, they're going to continue struggling. And I took that as a shot across the bow of the White Sox coaching staff, because they are the ones tolerating this, the not hustling out of the box, not giving it 110%. This team feels like they're still playing baseball in the month of May, and they have like 100 games left of the season. No, you got 50 games left to go, and you are falling further behind in the American League Central standings. So if Johnny Cueto says that this team is lacking fire, and this is coming from his experience in the clubhouse, I have to believe him, Jim. So what are your thoughts about Cueto questioning the lack of fire from the White Sox?
Well, I'll start with Andrew Vaughn and Daryl Van Schouwen's article about. It started with La Russa's comments before the game, and then he included Vaughn's comments after the game. As and Rec brought him up, I'll put them into the chat screen here. But he said, from the story, Andrew Vaughn, who homered in the 9th inning, said he agrees with Cueto. Yeah, I think so, Vaughn said. I'm not a big rah-rah guy, pretty quiet and soft-spoken. Whatever guys need to get themselves going on the field is great. So, it's, given that Vaughn is, he's not a big rah-rah guy. He's also basically a rookie. He's still trying to figure out his place in the team and pecking order. So, he's probably also not going to be the one who calls everybody out about it. So, he's not going to say 100%, down with Yohan Moncada, or he sign, whoever else he singles out if there is somebody to single out. But yeah, it's pretty. I guess the impression I get is that, Cueto's comments, Stone's comments, trying to think, I'm blanking now because I got distracted by Vaughn's comments. Who is the one who had the previous quote that was, Jose Abreu. He had the previous quote saying, talking about that, he's going about his business the best he can, but others might not be doing the same. And it almost strikes me as like a case where everybody's just waiting for Tony La Russa to leave. That's kind of my impression is between his lack of urgency and just, the clubhouse saying it's doing great, but nobody really responding to anything that well, and nobody feeling under the gun or trying all that hard. Like in the case of Luis Robert, we know that there have been limitations on hustle, but, as we're watching the singles pile up, the hot local singles, and the White Sox lead the league in singles, but they have one of the least effective offenses because singles are all they have. So it's if you're going singles, you need to go all in on that. And it's August. And if Luis Robert is not, running hard out of the box and the grounder, he can sometimes beat, he can beat grounders to the right side if there's any hesitation or any kind of, bungling on the part of the defense. And sure enough, he, jogs the first 40 feet. And by the time he sees Michael Massey bobbling it, he turns down, he's going to step and a half too late. And that's, I think, what's frustrating Stone and Benetti to a lesser extent. Stone's been more candid, but Benetti's backed him up here and there, just saying Benetti approaches it in terms of boy, I wish this team homered more because they can't. They need to maximize everything else. They can't, give away bases on base running. They can't give away extra outs. And Josh Harrison, we were talking about the extra outs. Harrison had a bad game. He had that one single that was really more of an error, and then he didn't get a tag down on the perfect Seby Zavala throw where it needed to be, and so gave the stolen base. That turned into a run. Andrew Vaughn, like another case where I don't think he can comment too loudly because like he had a couple singles drop within a step or two of him, which, if they drop a step or two away from Andrew Vaughn, like Nate Eaton, who we saw playing pretty well for the Royals, probably catches that standing up without an extraordinary
easily.
effort.
Yeah.
So, that's what I think we're kind of looking at, but just add it all up. And it seems like just, La Russa's there. The White Sox are there. The Venn diagram between the two does not really overlap. And they're just kind of biding their time. And I know that, when you look at like managerial changes, the Phillies are on one side, then you have the Angels on the other in terms of just like polar opposites in terms of how a team responds to managerial changes, because, it does come down to the talent in the end. But just when you see how many things are wrong with the White Sox and how many things are going unaddressed, it's just like, I would lean towards the Phillies side of the spectrum if I had to bet, just because there's so much that's just not happening. And I just felt so bad for Dylan Cease, because watching him pitch, like, once he gave the homer and then he got into trouble the next time with 2 walks over the first 3 batters in the 4th inning, you could see him digging deep. You could see like, oh, I've made the one mistake I can afford to make. And it turns out he couldn't really afford to make even that mistake. But just, once he saw like, oh, that was my other favorite part of that game. Yeah, I had a lot of favorite parts of this game apparently. But I like how the first inning they had 1 single. Second inning they had 2 singles. Third inning they had 3 singles, and they didn't score a run in any single inning. Like once I saw Seby Zavala get confused around second base, I thought like, oh no. This is just, also Stone had a nice piece of foreshadowing talking to Greinke and saying, oh, the White Sox get themselves out. And sure enough, once the bases get loaded, he just throws a bunch of 70-mile-per-hour curves to Elo Jimenez. He can't lay off. And then he just yo-yos Jose Abreu into the ground, fast, slow. That's, just seeing Cease doing his damnedest to make sure that he didn't do anything else wrong by throwing 100 miles per hour and throwing like a 91-mile-per-hour slider. Just, I felt so bad for the guy, because I think when it comes down to like, the pitchers know they're on their own. And it seems like it's separate units, and it always is to a certain extent with baseball teams, because they are like the starters are different from the bullpen, different from the everyday lineup. But it just, watching Cease doing everything he could and that not being good enough just made me think like, yeah, these are just fractured parts. They're not at war, but they're also not really together, it seems.
Well, I wouldn't blame the starting pitchers if they had a players only meeting, Jim, pointing the fingers and casting blame on the position players. Pitchers don't hit anymore. They don't. You have the permanent DH everywhere. And the White Sox are not scoring enough runs. Like, forget hits. And I'm going to bring this stat up, and Jeremy Frank posted this on Twitter, which you could follow him at MLB Random Stats. And what Jeremy tweeted for our podcast listeners, 705 of the White Sox first 1,000 hits this year are singles. The most recent teams to finish a season with at least 70% of their hits being singles: the 2018, 16, and 15 Marlins, and the 2015 Atlanta Braves. The Detroit Tigers are also in pace to join this list, but they haven't gotten to 1,000 hits yet on the season. 3 of those 4 teams, the hitting coach was Frank Menechino. And if the White Sox continue to have 70% of their hits being singles in 2022, the 5 teams that have 70% of the 1,000 plus hits in a season being singles, 4 of the 5 will be teams where their hitting coach was Frank Menechino. Frank, good luck getting another hitting job in the major leagues after this season.
Well, and what's funny too is that when the Tigers join this, if the Tigers join this list,
for their sake, Jim, I hope they join this list.
Yeah, just, you can't quite, I can't quite guarantee 1,000 hits, but who their hitting coach is?
No.
Scott Coolbaugh, who was the assistant hitting coach under Menechino last year.
Yeah.
Or 2 years ago, I should say.
Awesome.
Yeah, the 2020 season. So yeah, he was hired for the Tigers after. So yeah.
It's hard from an outside perspective, not being in the clubhouse. And obviously beat reporters maybe they can be transparent and honest with you when you're having a beer with them, and it's an off the record type of conversation, because they have to work with these players, and it's a very dangerous territory to be in, because if you screw up and you release something out in the public and it gets caught back, that player will stop talking to you. And that makes it a very difficult job to do as a beat. But from our perspective, and from the studio guys and radio and other commenters and other blogs and even White Sox fans, when it comes to Johnny Cueto questioning the team's fire, from the outside, it's hard to gauge on just where everybody's head is at. But the White Sox are most definitely lacking firepower. This has been a problem all season long. And it's just, now it's like a whole new level of torture watching this White Sox team, because of 14 hits. If a team gets 14 base hits in a game, you're thinking, all right, they're going to score at least like 6 runs, and that's an easy win, right?
Mm-hmm.
But singles don't do anything for this team, because they don't run, because some of the guys can't, because they're just super slow. The guys that do have speed are not running at 100% because they're worried they're going to blow up their hamstring. So there's just like no benefit.
And they don't draw walks.
And they don't draw walks.
Like singles are basically all the base runners.
Yeah. So it's just, it's like pointless. Like you're attempting to beat the other team with a death by 1,000 paper cuts. And how many years has it been, Jim, that we have been stating on our show, you do not win a world championship this way. It is ball go far, team go far. And the lesson that we talked about the White Sox had to learn from their postseason loss to Houston last year is that you need to hit for power, especially in the playoffs, because the teams that are hitting home runs win the damn thing. That's how the Atlanta Braves upset Milwaukee and Los Angeles and Houston last year to win the World Series. And it's like they didn't learn that lesson. And our best friend, Dan Zaborski over Fangraphs, just wrote a column about this, and I highly recommend it. Go to fangraphs.com and read Dan's perspective on what's going on with the White Sox. And we're going to share some of that data that he had in that blog post. But it's like they're just not learning. Maybe they're refusing to learn. And the fact that they didn't make any big adjustments to their roster, the whole concept of going big or go home, instead of in things we talked about, continuing to spend more money on the bullpen or fringe major leaguers that you say are depth pieces, but in reality, they're not depth pieces because you don't want them playing a whole lot. The fact that the White Sox did not learn from their mistakes in Houston, the fact that they had a poor offseason, the fact that they didn't make any moves before the trade deadline, like that's why they're 56-56 right now. And they're third place in the American League Central. The mistakes that they continue to make since October are really biting them in the butt, Jim.
Well, it's funny, the one area, I shouldn't say they don't acknowledge it. The one area they do definitely acknowledge or have acknowledged it was the draft, because they kept going for like Zach Collins, Jake Berger, Gavin Sheets, Andrew Vaughn, they were looking for power and plate discipline from the draft. Like, I don't know, maybe it's just because those skills are so, like the combination of those two skills are so expensive in the open market that they figured like, okay, the one way we have to get is through the draft. So they focused on it, but that ended up with them getting like 4 DHs or 4 first basemen, because like by the time they're drafting for that skill versus thinking they can develop it, whether it's one or the other, power or plate discipline, by the time they draft, outside of Vaughn, they have to draft the guys who are limited defensively or athletically, to where like it's hard for Zach Collins to stay behind the plate or Jake Berger to stay at third. So, that's how you end up with this pile up of like players, like 4 to 6 DHs in the lineup or organization on the 40-man roster. And so it just comes down to not wanting to super solve a problem. Like that's the phrase I keep coming back to is like, okay, it's going to be expensive. So what? It's
right.
It's you've proven you can't. You have some savings here because you have some pitchers who are cheaper. You have some savings here because you have some players under team control for a while. why don't you try splurging on right field to try to, address those shortcomings, or second base or what have you, to get like a, you know, Semyon or Trevor Story or Bryce Harper or George Springer, just down the line of players they tried, you know, tried to varying degrees or didn't try to varying degrees to sign just because they were going to cost a 9-figure contract. I think that's what I keep coming back to, is just they try to do it through the draft, which is probably, I shouldn't say probably, definitely the hardest way to do it, especially when you don't have the kind of talent or acumen for changing swings or training eyes or what have you, that like the Dodgers or the Yankees or, other teams do.
Yeah, it's one thing to draft guys. You still got to develop them, which is an entirely different department. And yeah, there's nothing behind right now. There's this gap as far as the White Sox development system. The guys that, Oscar Colas is doing great, but he just got to Double-A. Colson Montgomery's been doing great this year. He just got to Winston-Salem. Like, it seems like the incoming help is at least a year away for the White Sox. And we're going to take a look at the playoff odds here for the Chicago White Sox and where they currently stand. And when you look at the American League Central race, we called it, Jim. We're geniuses. Cleveland has finally made us look smart. They took over first place in the American League Central. They're 59-52. They have won 5 straight games as they swept at Detroit. So they did what the White Sox could not. They beat a bottom dweller handedly, or convincingly, I should say, and sweeping the Detroit Tigers in Detroit. They are 1.5 games ahead of the Minnesota Twins, who are 57-53, as the Minnesota Twins got whooped up again by the Los Angeles Dodgers. It was not fun this year for the Twins to face the Dodgers. The White Sox, as we mentioned, are 500. They're 56-56. They're 3.5 games back at Cleveland for first place. So after this series, the White Sox were 2 games back on Monday. They lost 1.5 games back in the division race. When you zoom out and you look at the wild card in the American League, Houston has caught the Yankees for the number 1 seed. So that's pretty interesting, as the Yankees are really struggling. They've lost 8 of their last 10 games. So Houston right now has a half-game lead over the Yankees for the number 1 seed, putting the Yankees in the number 2 seed. The number 3 seed would be Cleveland because they're leading the American League Central. Toronto would be the 4th seed, being the wild card host. Seattle is a half game behind Toronto at 61-52. And tied for the 6th seed is Tampa Bay and Baltimore. The Orioles have won 7 of the last 10 games, and they are still within the playoff race. I can't believe it. And then Minnesota's a game behind Baltimore and Tampa Bay, and the White Sox are 3 games back of the Orioles and Rays. That's where they currently are. Let's look at their projections. So looking at Cueto right now, simulating the rest of the season 1,000 times, has the White Sox more often finishing 3rd in the American League Central. And for those that are watching on YouTube, that's what this graph shows, is all the results of 1,000 simulations. More times than not, the White Sox finish in 3rd behind Cleveland and Minnesota. For Cueto, Cleveland is the projected winner of the American League Central with 50 games remaining. Fangraphs. I'm going to warn you, for those that are watching on YouTube, this is probably not safe for work. You may throw something off of your computer desk, because this graph is really disheartening. This graph, for those that are listening on the podcast, is the Fangraphs American League Central playoff odds from the beginning of the season to the present. At one point, the White Sox odds of reaching the postseason in 2022 was above 80%. It's currently below 34%. And it's taken a sharp turn in the past week, in which now Cleveland has a 57% chance of reaching the postseason. The Minnesota Twins have a 51% chance of reaching the postseason. Again, they're just a game back of the 6th seed in the wild card. And the White Sox have dropped down to a 34% chance of reaching the postseason. With that being said, Jim, for so long, when we have been talking about this White Sox team, that there was still hope, because you can go to the projection models, you can go to the projection systems, and those systems that we really lean on as far as with their preseason coverage and Cueto and Zips and Fangraphs suggested that the White Sox were going to turn their season around at some point. They still had better talent, more talent than Minnesota and Cleveland, and they should win the American League Central, but not at the record that we were expecting preseason, but they should still make the playoffs. We are now in August 11th, and the postseason odds for the White Sox have fallen to 34%. Is this the end? Like, is this where the White Sox fans that have been saying the season's been over for a couple of weeks, are we inching closer to there's going to feel like a finality to this 2022 season for the White Sox?
I'm inclined to say no, but not because the White Sox, turn it around or look like they're turning around, but more because just the nature of the AL Central, I think, just like the tractor beam effect, like keeps pulling everybody back towards each other. So, I think right now you're seeing the Guardians leap ahead, but that's because they're playing the Tigers while the Twins are playing the Dodgers, who are unstoppable right now. Like they're looking like a super Dodgers team. And we've seen so many super Dodgers teams in the past. They shouldn't be impressing us, but somehow this team is. So like we've seen it before where just, one team is beaten up on a cellar dweller, another team's going to the cream of the crop. And so it looks like, oh, this is the week where the Twins gain some separation. This is the week where the Guardian, and then just once the schedule turns, that's why it's so, it's been so topsy-turvy. I think the thing that makes this different is that, as we're seeing in the Fangraphs graphs and the baseball prospectus chart, is that this should have been the area where they gained ground. And like you said, 8-8 in this 19-game stretch against all below 500 teams. Like this should have been the time where they pad their standings a bit and take advantage of it. And then as the standings, they lose some of the expected winning percentage edge that they had because these teams are in the rearview mirror and they're not gaining ground. They're losing ground, in fact, to the Guardians. That's where I think the formulas projections say like, they should have done better in these 16 games. These wins are no longer part of the factor. So, that's why you're seeing the percentage plummet. So it is, I think this is different. And I think when, Rick Hahn, assuming he has his start of homestand media session, like I'm curious, one, if he's going to have it, because he has ducked the press at times like this where there's nothing to say and nothing new to report. Like, he has been called out on it before. So maybe he doesn't make that appearance, but like he can't say that, there's a lot of season left or, we're playing to the back of baseball cards, because now all of a sudden the back of the baseball cards, the projections would have it like they no longer apply. They don't agree with what the White Sox are saying. So now it has to be different. Now it has to be and now there need to be heroes. Now it can't be a matter of just regressing to the mean. There need to be actual players and units that step up. So I'm really curious to see how that goes, because there really is no good news, because as we saw, like even the good news, like Johnny Cueto delivering 6 good innings every time, and Dylan Cease setting records with his stinginess with earned runs, they don't matter.
Let's talk about what's next for the White Sox. So far in this episode, we've talked a lot about where the White Sox currently are and what's ailing them, what's going on in the clubhouse, the lack of fire. They got 50 games left to go in this season. And when I ask the question, what's next for the White Sox, Jim, I'm looking at the lens of what happens if they don't make the playoffs. Like, what are going to be the ramifications of missing the postseason? And I bet in the upcoming weeks, we're going to get a suggestion that there are going to be changes made within the White Sox front office. It may feel very similar to what we saw within the Chicago Bulls.
God willing.
And you mentioned Rick Hahn, and I'm sure he's feeling like the ant underneath the magnifying glass right now on a sunny day. And he should, because this is a $190 million payroll, and they are a 500 team. We've never seen the White Sox spend this type of money before, and they are getting nothing out of it. Very similar feel to the big offseason moves leading up to the 2015 season and the big offseason moves leading up to the 2016 season. A reminder, both of those teams did not finish above 500 and, of course, led to the White Sox big rebuild teardown leading up to this moment of where we are in 2022 during the supposed contention window. From the people I speak with, the payroll that the White Sox are at in 2022 is not sustainable if they do not make the playoffs. So the thought process of, well, just spend more money, keep the payroll at $190 million, that will not happen if they do not have playoff revenue. So expect for the Sox Machine offseason plan project to not only try to build a competitive team, but also, by the way, slash payroll by $20 to $30 million. That will make that task super fun to participate in and super easy. That's what's swirling in my head right now, Jim, is the ramifications if they do not reach the postseason. How about you? What do you think the possible ramifications are for the White Sox if they do not improve over these next 50 games? They do not overtake Cleveland and Minnesota in the American League Central.
I was reading the follow-up stories about the Tigers firing Al Avila, after 7 years and only one winning season, which happened to be at the very beginning. And then they've been kind of lost in the wilderness afterwards. And just like daydreaming about how nice that would be to have that story for us and be able to like write about very kind of like when you talked about the brief window where Rick Renteria was fired and realized like, oh, the White Sox seem like they have ambition here. They're really trying hard. They really saw the status quo as unacceptable. This is cool. They're doing an external search. There are some really intriguing and proven candidates out there. I wonder where this is going to go. And then, it turns out that the light at the end of the tunnel was a train, and it's we're still living with it this day. But I was just kind of daydreaming and thinking like, oh, it'd be really interesting just to write about like GM candidates and think about like, is it going to be from the Rays tree or the Astro? Just how are they going to do this? And then, I had people, tweeting at me saying, well, that's not going to happen. And just like, why would you ruin somebody's day? That's not the point of this. Like, I'm just trying to go to a happy place in my head of just, it's like saying like, oh, I'm going to Hawaii in my mind, and just like, oh, you want to be on a 10-hour flight with a bunch of people coughing? Like, shut up. let me have this. So I was thinking about that, and just, then I was thinking about like, if it is a case where they can't carry 190 million, like, why would you trust Rick Hahn? And by saying Rick Hahn, like, I also include Kenny Williams. I include like basically everybody in the decision-making ranks, like whoever you want to blame, whoever your favorite scapegoat is, fine. Like it's all one unit to me. So Rick Hahn and Kenny Williams have been working together for 20 something years now. So if Rick Hahn felt like he was being undercut at every moment, he probably would have lasted this long. So I think they're all happy with the way things are going until proven otherwise. Why would you trust them to take this team and try to compete again when you have to, theoretically cut money from this payroll? When you have like the teams like Twins and the Guardians and the Royals getting better. Like that's the thing that's, kind of nuts about this division, is that like, it'd be one thing if like, say the Twins like were like, say they had 65 wins right now because like Joe Ryan is a beast and because Byron Buxton is playing 160 games all of a sudden. And just, you look all around the diamond, like Alex Kirilloff finally putting it together, like having all these like best case scenarios working out for them in the way we thought they might be a force, a couple of years ago. You could say like, oh, well, I guess the Twins like beat the projections. They got great. That's really unfortunate. Like if the White Sox finish second to a story like that. But I mean, like the Twins, like they're just as beat up as the White Sox, like in a lot of ways. Look at the Guardians, like they didn't try this winter. They cut corners. They we're just trying to get by with a team that could theoretically, compete, maybe hang around for that extra postseason spot. Like I don't think their ambitions were the Central Division. I think they were just trying to like see if we can get to 85 wins and see if that's enough. They've had some nice breakout stories like Ahmed Rosario and such, and some contributions from younger players, but they're still like the same old Guardians. And they weren't trying to be anything better over the course of the winter. Then you have the Royals that, have been a disaster until as of late, because they finally promoted some of the rookies. Then you have the Tigers, who have, been such a mess that they fired Avila. So, I mean, like, this division sucks. And nobody is playing beyond what the general expectations were, and some are very much underplaying it. And the White Sox look like they can't compete. So that's what I keep coming back to, is like, this isn't a case where like, oh, the division got tough in a hurry. No, it didn't. The White Sox are just somehow playing down to it. Like, and in a way where just like, you look at the, like with the Jose Abreu discussion, like, he enters a contract year, like, what is the offensive core here? Like, who are the must keeps? Like, I keep hearing Andrew Vaughn, which is like, probably, but there should be a guy who's like, yes, he's the cleanup hitter for the foreseeable future. Even with or without Abreu, we have the guy who's now carrying the baton, and the guy this lineup is built around. Like, the White Sox do not have that guy yet, and that's a problem when you have a rebuild that tears it down, and you sell off all the parts with all the team control they had, and they got some nice pitchers out of it. But when it comes to like Moncada falling apart, Jimenez not being healthy, Robert being somewhat enigmatic, it's tough to know like how this team can compete with a lower payroll without like a real visionary at the helm, or somebody who has like somebody who can like look at this and say like, I know how to add by subtracting. Like, I know, like, you may feel bad about trading Jimenez, or, and that's just to throw a name out there. Like, you may feel bad about trading Vaughn, but trust me, like the talent we can acquire, or the way this might unlock the depth chart, like, this might happen. But I don't think Hahn or Williams or whoever has that imagination. Like, I shouldn't say no. Like, they've proven they don't. And I don't get why they should keep getting the chance to prove that they do. I mean, like, I think I'm gonna be writing about this tomorrow, but like, the difference between like Hahn and Al Avila is that Avila didn't have prime players to sell. Like, he had Justin Verlander, very expensive at the end of his contract. You have Miguel Cabrera, you have JD Martinez, who was kind of rickety. You do not have prime Chris Sale and prime Jose Quintana and prime Adam Eaton. Like, so I mean, like, if Hahn didn't have that and he tried tearing it down, it might look the same as the Tigers. Like, you're talking about like 110 lost seasons and can't even get to 70 wins, and having this kind of backsliding from top 5 draft picks. Like, this is, that's what I see.
I think if I had to make a prediction, Rick Hahn is going to move into a special advisor to Jerry Reinsdorf role, because the White Sox don't fire anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And they will bring in a new executive vice president, general manager, probably someone that Ken Williams will pick. The name that pops in my head is Mike Hill, the former general manager of the Miami Marlins and currently working within Major League Baseball operations. That's like the first name. They don't have money to bring in Theo Epstein. Mm-hmm. But you are right, Jim. Like, you can't have Rick Hahn, if they don't make the postseason, try to fix this problem.
And I should say you can, but it won't work. let's put it that way. Like, the White Sox very well might, but nobody should expect to be successful.
And on 35th and Shields, they may argue with us and be like, oh yeah, we're going to prove you wrong. Like, come on. The things that we've been saying for years have come to fruition. Like, anyone that's been paying attention has been telling you that these problems are going to come up, and they keep coming up. It's like, we're idiots, but we're not complete idiots. Like, during the rebuild, while we were watching you do your work and building up a new farm system, we were also paying attention to the teams that are very good and paying attention to and how they operate their business. And you need to take a little bit from each of these teams to take in some of that knowledge, because it is working. And Baltimore's having all this success. What did they do in their rebuild? Let's hire a bunch of Astros employees. And it's working. And who's the number 1 seed right now in the American League? Houston. And what does everybody want to do? They want to hire away from the Rays and the Dodgers. yes, the entire Major League Baseball is one big think tank. And if you don't try to get some of that knowledge into your organization, you're going to fall behind, because whether you like it or not, these models are working. These tactics are working. They are developing winning teams.
Yeah, and the reason why part of the reason why the White Sox don't really have any turnover in their ranks is because nobody hires away their employees. Like
Right,
nobody
because they're
thinks the
not good
White Sox
enough.
have ideas worth emulating, so everybody just hangs around.
Yes. So that's what I think would be next for the White Sox. When we're looking at these next 50 games, if they go 25-25 and they finish 81-81 this season, that's just how I feel like this season is going to end. They're going to be 81-81. Like, I don't think Rick Hahn is going to be GM. I think he's going to be the one that falls on the sword. I wouldn't be shocked if Tony La Russa comes back as manager, because Jerry gets what he wants. But whoever comes in, some of the tough decisions, like our friend B-Flow from the 108 put this on Twitter, like, who would you honestly move that other teams would like, and you would get something that brings in an impact return that could help the 2023 White Sox win? And there's a lot of people that keep up reading, well, Eloy Jimenez has got to go. Well, Lucas Giolito. I'm going to go a different route. I don't think a lot of teams want a guy who's got a 5 ERA and another guy who has 30 home run potential, but might only play 60 games for you. That might be shocking to hear, White Sox fans, that Lucas Giolito and Eloy Jimenez don't have a great deal of trade value. I don't know, like, if you can hold on to Liam Hendricks after this season. He's been great for the White Sox, but having that type of closer for that type of money just doesn't make a whole lot of sense right now for the White Sox. And there will be teams lining up to acquire Liam Hendricks. Make another trade with the Los Angeles Dodgers this coming offseason. Trade him another closer. They would take Liam Hendricks in a heartbeat. And you got 4 very talented shortstops in this upcoming free agent class. And these 4 talented shortstops are going to make a lot of money. From a White Sox perspective, I would not be eagerly pushing out Tim Anderson in the trade market. But if I'm the other 29 teams, and I have one of these teams that doesn't want to pay $25+ million to a shortstop over the next 6 seasons, I'm picking up the phone and I'm calling the White Sox about Tim Anderson, because he's got 2 years on that deal. They're club options, and he is very cheap compared to the free agents that are going to be on the trade market. If I'm the White Sox, you would have to listen, because if you're looking for an impact return, yeah, Tim Anderson can definitely provide you that, because he's got 2 years left on his deal, where in those 2 years, you're paying the same amount for 1 year of like Trey Turner, who is a free agent, or Carlos Correa, who is a free agent, or Xander Bogaerts is a free agent. Like, those are the 2 players that I'm circling. Like, if you're looking for an impact move to bring in talent that could help you in 2023, those would be the 2 guys. Nobody wants to hear that from a White Sox perspective, because these are player favorites. They're very good. Why would you trade away the guys that are very good? Why don't you trade away the guys that aren't good? Because shockingly, nobody wants your bad players. Nobody wants your injured players. Nobody wants your underperforming players. And I guess in the end, like, what's next for the White Sox in these next 50 games? We're going to have to watch on how Eloy Jimenez hits, because if he does continue to hit well, and if he hits for more home runs, that's great, Eloy. You're helping your trade value. If Lucas Giolito figures it out and he strings together, let's say, 6 quality starts that helps lower his ERA closer to 4, fantastic, Lucas. Thank you. We're going to trade you as soon as you file your arbitration number, so we have a better idea of what your 1-year salary is going to be in 2023. And that kind of sucks, because when this contention window started, we were hopeful that these guys would stick around for a long time. But there's also a point that you have to take a lesson, and this rebuild started because of the Chicago Cubs' success, a lesson from Theo Epstein and Jed Hoyer managing the Cubs, and they have admitted sometimes you hold on too long. And it just happened again at the trade deadline. Like, they held on Ian Happ and Wilson Contreras too long, in my opinion. But they held on too long with Chris Bryant. They held on too long for Anthony Rizzo. They held on too long with Javier Baez. They probably should have moved him earlier so they can get more impact prospects, so they're not in the position that they're currently in, which is fighting to avoid finishing last place in the National League Central. And if you want this contention window to go longer, with 50 games left to go in the 2022 season, someone in this organization is going to have to start thinking about the types of moves you have to make in November, December, because you cannot copy and paste this roster into 2023 and go, Jim, with the idea of dreams, hopes, and prayer. That's what we're going to do in 2023. Yeah.
Basically stay healthy.
Basically stay healthy. And 2023 is going to be awesome, guys. And you're going to look foolish even contemplating trading some of these good players. But we've been right so far. And I think the writing is on the wall. Like, if you want to extend this contention window, one, find a better person to drive the thinking than Rick Hahn. Two, reshuffle the roster. You got a lot of redundant pieces. And if you're going to have to slash payroll, really maximize the returns on the players that other teams want, like Liam Hendriks and Tim Anderson.
Yeah, you think about Hendricks's trade value and thinking about like the last time, like when the White Sox signed him and like they made news for the creative structuring of the contract. It was basically like, are they going to pay him $15 million in his final year? Or are they going to pay him $1 million for 15 years with the buyout? Isn't that crazy? And just like, that's where like, Rick Hahn's accounting, like basically like, back when players would sign themselves for super cheap for extensions, like the Sale Quintana, Anderson Eaton deals, like that was like cool and exciting for fans because they could see like how the pieces fit and how you can, extrapolate their earnings in coming years and say like, oh, you can really add players around those kind of salaries. But then like, as the salaries got more expensive, all these deals became like too clever by half, whether it was, signing guys before they'd played a game for close to retail rates, or at least, not too far away from what they'd be making in arbitration going year to year. And then you had, like Hendricks with this. And I remember like reading that, like, oh, that's different. Am I supposed to care? Like, as a fan, like, is this supposed to get me excited? Like, why do I care about like the White Sox balance? It went from being like, oh, I see how teams can be built, to like, why do I feel like I'm just sitting in like on a CPA call? Like that's, the fan appeal from, Hahn's accounting really dropped off. So, that seems to me like it was the only club in his bag, and it just doesn't work anymore. So it's like a one iron or something like that nobody swings because they can't. That's what it reminds me of. So yeah, just they have to get creative. Like, I keep last year I threw Eloy Jimenez's name out there as somebody who should maybe be moved because of the idea of selling a year too early versus a year too late. Like, they actually did that with Nick Madrigal. Like, I thought that was the
that's a good
say what
point.
you will about Craig Kimbrell, but I felt like, I understood why they dealt him, because like, how much can he lose in talent from one season ending surgery after another, until all of a sudden like he can barely produce enough to stay in the majors. Like that's how I looked at that. So I understood when they dealt him, but like, I had the same kind of thought with Jimenez. Is just like, how many surgeries can he have until like he just, his limitations render him to a DH entirely, and so that's kind of how I look at it. And with Vaughn, I'm kind of looking ahead at his, the leg issues or the back issue that he has, and say like, is that a problem? Like, I don't really know. So, I mean, like, I would open up even further, just because it does, I would add Vaughn into as somebody who has like probably immense value to some teams who can either use him better at first base as natural position, or a DH, or just think that, they can keep him healthier, which, a lot of teams might be able to think they can do, because the White Sox have been really bad in this regard, even relative to a league that does lose more games than it used to injuries.
We did get this question from the comments section on YouTube from Brian O'Connor, and Brian wrote to us, do you think there are any untouchables for the White Sox? Maybe Luis Robert and Dylan Cease. I don't know. I guess personally, Jim, I would put Luis Robert in the untouchable category, because I still believe in his ability, and he's going to make just $9.5 million next year for the White Sox, which is still pretty cheap for the type of value you can get. Dylan Cease is going to be in arbitration 1 next year. So he may get $5 million, but $5 million for the type of performance that he could provide you in 2023. Yeah, if you want Dylan Cease, you're going to have to back up the prospect truck to get him from the White Sox. Because I mean, it might be worth it for other teams, but it would have to take one great of a haul. And I would almost put those two as untouchables, but those are really the only two that I can think of. Like if you want anybody else in the White Sox entering this offseason, if those that are already trying to come up with ideas of how you're going to participate in the Sox Machine offseason plan project, is it just those two? Is there anyone else that you consider untouchable?
I don't think there are any untouchables. Like I think Cease could be, like if you're really looking to reinvent the roster, like Cease would be like the,
I mean, that's another Chris Sale type of move.
Yeah, it'd be like risk reward, obviously. And like you don't, I don't think you toy with that idea lightly, but I think if you have to try to reimagine this roster and try to solve, kind of turn if you're trying to turn one player into solving 2 or 3 spots, like that's kind of what the depths you have to go to. So I think you have to keep that avenue open. But yeah, with Robert, just like I said, just between his injuries and effort level and whether the injuries are driving the effort level or not, like, he's somebody playing below his talent right now. And is that something that's going to be following him when it comes to, just injuries, just eating away at his ability to like access that MVP level talent we think he has? Like I could see arguments for moving everybody, like in a way, just, but it's a case where like, yeah, you don't move Dylan Cease just for prospects. Like you move him because like, oh, we can maybe get a guy who helps us, basically like we can replace Dylan Cease better than we can solve right field. And Dylan Cease can help us solve right field now and add a player who might help us in a year solve this position. Like, so that's, I think, how it'd have to look. It would be just 4 prospects. It wouldn't be starting another rebuild. They can't do that at this point. We've seen that, I think there are teams that have proven like you don't need to lose hard on purpose, because either like the Tigers are just going to keep doing it because you don't have the skill to develop players to take over, or it's a case like the Brewers to where you just need to take minor step back. You don't have to always tear it down completely. Just might have to make an unpopular move like trading a Josh Hader just to regroup and have a better, more evenly allocated depth chart. So I don't think anybody's untouchable. I don't mean that. Yeah, I hope the White Sox, wouldn't take that, or White Sox fans take that as like, oh, they're tearing it down again, because I think we've learned that tearing it down is a sham.
Yes. And this has been a pretty dour conversation.
Mm-hmm.
To avoid this, there's 50 games left. The White Sox are going to have to go at least being the key phrase, 30-20. At least 30-20. That gets you to 86 wins. And right now, 86 wins looks to be on track to winning the American League Central. That's the least you can do in these final 50 games. So if the White Sox want to avoid all of these terrible ramifications that we've thought of, they got to go 30-20 at the least in the remaining 50 games of the season. Every time I've said that, they continue going 500.
Yeah, it's a case where I'm looking at this Tiger series ahead, and I'm thinking like this is a series where they can sweep, because that would put them 11-8, which I said would probably be the most frustrating outcome of this 19 games, because it's I felt like they needed to win 2 games for every loss, like basically like 13-6 or 12-7, 11-8 would be not cutting it. And sure enough, like I could see them ending up there and be like, oh, looks like we turned the corner, when really they just, in the big picture, or I should say like zooming out just a bit, like you can say like, oh, this is just short of what they needed to do. And so I can see like 30-20 being like, I think in a vacuum, yes, but like maybe if they strategically allocate their wins perfectly against the Twins and Guardians, that maybe they only need to go 27-23. Who knows? Like this division is that bad. So it's I've been looking at it like basically a series at a time, like a week at a time, just because the division's so bad. And like I keep coming back to that. Like I wish the division were a little bit better just to make it more clear. Well, I guess in a way, like the division being as bad as it is, and the White Sox not being able to distinguish themselves in any way makes their failure more stark, even if the standings don't show it, at least to me.
Well, let's talk about the Tiger series real quick before we wrap up this episode of Sox Machine Live. Your pitching probables for this series starting on Friday night. This is a 6:10 p.m. Central Time start. Keep that in mind. 6:10, not 7:10 Friday night. It's Michael Kopech. Saturday night, 6:10 p.m. Central Time. It'll be Lucas Giolito. And on Sunday, August 14th, it'll be Lance Lynn. And that start is at 1:10 p.m. Central Time. Lance Lynn needs to throw a perfect game to help me in the stake bet that I have with Beefloaf because it is not looking good right now. Come on, Lance.
You're hemorrhaging stakes.
I'm hemorrhaging stakes, but that fourth stake bet that we have laid down, I feel really good about. And we may have to fly to San Francisco to cash in that stake bet win for me. This has been a lot of fun. It's great to bring back Sox Machine Live as far as in this format. The first time we've done it since early July. For those that have been watching our videos on YouTube, apologize for not putting out more content on our YouTube page. We'll work on that. But Jim, it's great to fire up the video machine once again and be able to stream a live episode during the week.
Yeah, I wish it were more pleasant. Like, one thing I get angry about Rick Hahn is like, you're the reason we have 2-star iTunes or Apple podcast reviews. Like, oh, Josh and Jim are too pessimistic. Like, not anymore, but we're not going to get those reviews back, are we?
No, we're not, but it's fine. It's fine.
It's fine. It's fine.
But that will do it for this episode of Sox Machine Live. Thank you to everyone that watched the live stream on our YouTube page at youtube.com/Sox Machine and also watching on SoxMachine.com. You can follow us on Twitter. We're at Sox Machine, and you can subscribe to the Sox Machine podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. So if you didn't get a chance to watch the video, or if you're listening to us while riding the train or driving, you can subscribe to the podcast, such as on Apple Music and on Spotify. If you just discovered Sox Machine or been a long-time lurker of Sox Machine, you can help support us on patreon.com/Sox Machine, where our Patreon supporters, they get more. They get exclusive content. They get ad-free versions of both the podcast and website. And we have new Sox Machine swag, which we are working on, and I'm very excited about. They're the first ones to get it. Monthly plans start at $2, and you can save with an annual subscription. Again, sign up at patreon.com/Sox Machine. Sox Machine Live is a production of SoxMachine.com, part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network, and your home for all things Chicago White Sox baseball. Alongside Jim Margulis, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.